Oh boy.
When I wake up each day, I feel so weary. Try to face the world, but it's so dreary. But I found that special thing that makes me cheery. Time to do music theory. Music theory.
You're watching Adventures in Music Theory with your host, Dr. Robbins. Greetings and welcome to the April 24th edition of Online Voice Leading class. Yay! Today we're going to start the last unit we're going to study this semester. Big yay! And it's sort of a tricky little unit. But you all can do this, and we've got plenty of time to cover it, so buckle up and prepare to enjoy this and stuff. I've got very little to play on the keyboard today, but it's all rather interesting and illustrative, so let's get started. On the slide, you'll see I've got two chords up there. And there's nothing particularly new or novel or special about them. You all know how to deal with those for a long time. One of them's a seventh chord that's a major minor seventh chord. One of them's the root and third of a minor triad. And the key signature says we could be in G minor, and that would make sense because that chord that starts out would be a 5-7 chord in G minor going to a 1 chord in G minor, as 5-7 chords like to do. And we talked about 5/7 chords first in the chapter on 7th chords and discussed the idea that we call them dominant 7th chords because we almost always find them on the dominant scale degree, and that the major minor 7th chord, the 5-7 chord that is, has that power to make us know what the tonic is going to be even before we hear it. And that's going to be illustrated when I play the chord. Here is the chord. And you can probably already imagine the chord you think is going to come next. Imagine it minor instead of major, though. But here it is one more time. And it's going to resolve to this. And that doesn't really have a lot of surprises for us. We sort of expected it was going to do that. We knew it was either going to go here or here to the G major chord. But since we're in the key of G minor, we'd go to G minor. And the thing we know from the 7th chord chapter is the things that make that progression tick are two things. One is the 7th of the chord, that C natural on the top, that wants to go down by step to the 3rd of the G minor chord. And the other thing that's working there is that leading tone, the F sharp, that really wants to go up to the tonic. At the same time, the 7th goes down to the 3rd of the G minor chord. So, you hear that D7 chord, and it starts making you expect the G minor chord that's going to come next. That's how major minor 7th chords exert their power. And here I've made one teensy tiny change to what's happening. And it's not a change we're going to hear, it's only a change we see. It's what that little red arrow is pointing to. Notice I changed the key signature. Now the key signature doesn't say we're in G minor anymore. It says we'd be in like D minor or F major or something like that. However, ask yourself this question. Has anything about the sound of those two chords from G minor changed? And the answer is, of course, no. And the pop chord symbols above the staff there bear it out. It's still a D7 chord going to a G minor chord. And when I hear that D7 chord, I'm like, you better go to G minor. And it does. So nothing about the sound of the chords has changed. That major minor 7th chord still sounds like a 5-7 chord. But it's not a 5-7 chord because the key signature says we're not in any key where the D, F sharp, A, C chord would be the 5 chord. Now we're in F major or D minor. So we couldn't really call it 5-7. Or could we? And the answer is, yeah, sort of. We could call it 5-7 in a sense. And those Roman numerals there show us what we want to do with it if, say, we were hearing a piece of music in F major, and suddenly, after we were plowing along in F major, that D7 chord suddenly showed up, it would sound like G minor's dominant, and we'd expect the next chord to be that G minor chord still, even though maybe everything we were hearing was still in the key of F major. So because of that, we're going to still call that D, F sharp, A, C chord a 5-7 chord because it's a major minor 7 chord. And we always want to call major minor 7 chords 5-7 chords. But notice we have to make our Roman numeral get a little bit more involved, because now we're writing 5-7/2. And what we would actually call this chord when we give that Roman numeral a verbal name is we would call it 5-7/2. And here's what that means. What we're saying is this. The D, F sharp, A, C chord sounds like somebody's 5-7 chord. And the somebody whose 5-7 chord it sounds like is G. So if we're in the key of F, then we talk about who G is. G is the second note of the scale, and there's a minor chord on it. So our Roman numeral expands to accommodate that. And what we're saying is that D, F sharp, A, C chord, that's a major minor 7 chord, is 5-7, but it's not the 5-7 chord we use in the key of F. It's a 5-7 chord that's borrowed or visiting into the key of F, and it's a 5-7 chord that works better for the second note of the scale, or G. So we say it's 5-7, and then we write the slash to say, but it's 5-7/2. And since in the key of F major, the chord built on scale degree 2 is minor, we write 5-7/2. I'm hoping that makes sense. Notice the voice leading is still doing everything it did when we were in G minor. The D7's C chord, or the D7's C note, which is the 7th, is going down a step to B flat, because 7ths go down by step. And the D7's F sharp is going up a half step to G, because it sounds like G's leading tone. Even though it's not the leading tone in the key of F, it sounds like the leading tone for G. Let me show you another one and we'll see if it makes any more sense. I've changed the key signature yet again. Now there are no flats in it at all, or any sharps in it. It looks like we could be in C major or A minor. And let's pretend we're in C major. If we were in the key of C major, that sounds like C major, doesn't it? Well, if we were in C major, just having fun, minding our own business, and that D7 chord suddenly showed up, it sounds like a 5-7 for G, and I want the next chord I hear to be a G chord. But I'm still going to call that D7 chord that's a major minor 7 chord a 5-7 chord. And I'm going to write the Roman numeral like we write it for a major minor 7 chord, an uppercase 5 with a 7 afterwards. But I'm going to put the slash, and on the right side of the slash, I'm going to put down whatever tells me where I'd go in the key of C major to find G. Well, in the key of C major, G is built on the 5th note of the scale, and it's a major chord. So here I'm going to say this is 5-7/5, and the 5 chord in a major key is major, so I'm going to write an uppercase 5. Because that D7 chord, it's a major minor 7th chord, and major minor 7th chords sound like dominant 7th chords. They sound like 5-7 all the time. Let's look at another example. Let's assume that we have this key signature, but we're not in C major. Let's assume we're in the other key that has no sharps or flats in its key signature. Let's assume we're in A minor. Well, that doesn't matter, the D, F sharp, A, C chord. All it knows is it sounds like a dominant 7th chord. And when we hear it in A minor, it's still going to sound like the chord that comes after it should be a G chord. But in the key of A minor, the G chord is built on the 7th note of the scale, the subtonic, and it's major. So we're going to say this is 5/7 of 7, and we're going to write the 7 uppercase like a major chord. So remember how D7 wants to pull to G. And now let me play in the key of A minor. I'll just give us a couple chords to get us acclimated. So we're in A minor, right? It sounds like A minor real nicely here. And here's that D7 chord. What do you want to hear next? Not an A minor chord, but a G chord. Even though the whole piece might wind up to be in the key of A minor. And it is. But that D7 chord wants to pull to the G major chord. So we call it 5/7 of what G major is in the key of A minor. We call it 5/7 of subtonic 7. So it's a chord that sounds like a 5/7 chord, but it's not the 5/7 chord of the key we're in. And the name for these 5/7 chords that aren't the quote-unquote real 5/7 chord is we call them secondary dominants. And here's the big thing. Just like the big thing with 7th chords was the 7th of the chord resolves down by a step, the big thing with secondary dominants is this. Major minor 7th chords are always 5/7 chords, even when they're not the 5/7 chord of the key we're in. So anytime we encounter a major minor 7th chord, our Roman numeral is going to start off saying 5/7. And if it's not 5/7 of the key we're in, like if we're in the key of C major, the 5/7 chord is the 5/7 chord is G, B, D, F. Well, if we're in the key of C major and we hear a major minor 7th chord, like if we hear an A, C sharp, E, G chord, that's a major minor 7th chord, so we're going to call it 5/7. But we're not going to just stop at 5/7 because it's not the actual 5/7 chord in the key of C. That's the G, B, D, F. So we're going to have that big Roman numeral that says 5/7/, and then on the other side there will be some number telling us what note in the scale that would be the 5/7 chord for. So in the key of C major, for instance, if that A, C sharp, E, G chord showed up, we would call it 5/7 of 2. And I'll explain how to figure that out in a couple frames here. But the big takeaway is this. Major minor 7th chords are 5/7 chords. And here's the other big thing. Secondary dominants are chromatic chords. So far everything we've been looking at has been dealing with diatonic chords. And remember, diatonic just means that all the pitches are pitches that belong to the key or belong to the scale that we're using. Like if we're in the key of C major, all the pitches are natural pitches. And the 5/7 chord in C major is G, B, D, F, and all those notes belong to the C major scale, and it's what we call a diatonic chord. All the notes fit in the scale. That other chord I was talking about happening in C major, the A, C sharp, E, G chord, I told y'all a couple slides back, it would be a 5/7 of 2 chord, and it would be a chromatic chord. And the thing that would make it chromatic would be that note in the chord that does not fit in the key of C major. If it's A, C sharp, E, G, then it's got a C sharp in it, which is definitely not part of the key of C or a C major scale. So chromatic means, not part of the scale, not part of the key we're in. And the nice thing about secondary dominants is, with one exception, you can always see them because they always have something visual that's going to pop off the page and let you know they're chromatic. They'll have a flat or a sharp or a natural or a double sharp or whatever that's not part of the key we're in. So they give themselves away visually. You can see them. That's what being chromatic looks like. It means you can see a note that's not part of the key you're in. And of course, the other nice thing is we can hear these things because You know, as I demonstrated when I was playing it a minute ago, you can hear when a note that's not part of the key shows up. It sort of pushes the music to a slightly different place. That's what we call tonicizing. More about that later. So, there are really only three things that are frustrating about secondary dominants: how to identify them, how to create them, and how to label them. Other than that, they're a piece of cake. Perhaps nobody else thinks that's funny, but at any rate, I'm going to make all this simple and stuff. So let's look at some things here. Now, you know, the one thing that's going to remain simple, or at least not going to get any more complicated, is how we label these chords above the staff with pop chord symbols. Pop chord symbols don't care if it's a secondary dominant or a diatonic chord or whatever. Pop chord symbols are what they are. This doesn't change or add to our pop chord symbol vocabulary at all. It adds to our Roman numeral vocabulary quite a lot, though. So that little staff that's displaying on the page there that came out of your textbook demonstrates this nicely. You'll notice that there's an FAC E flat chord in all those measures there, and in every single measure that chord is called the same thing in pop chord symbol. It's called F7, because that's how you label a major minor seventh chord with a pop chord symbol. You just write down the name of the root and put a 7 after it, and you're done. It gets more complicated when we start labeling that F7 chord in different keys. Now, there are some keys it shows up in that are really easy, like the very first one there, B flat major. In the key of B flat major, F7 is the 5-7 chord, and all the notes in that 5-7 chord, the F, the A, the C, the E flat, they're all part of B flat major, and F is the 5th note of B flat major, the dominant, so it makes sense that that's the dominant scale. And in that first measure, that's a diatonic chord. Now you look at all the other chords on that page, though, the ones that I just put the green box around, those are all secondary dominants, and that means that they're all chromatic chords. And if you look at them all, you can see what would make them chromatic in those different keys. Now, the thing I want you to notice is, as far as the notes in each measure, it's always the same notes. It's always F, A, C, E flat. But in the key of F major, for me to write that chord, I have to change one of the notes out of the scale. I have to make the E natural into E flat. That's what makes that a chromatic chord. In the key of E flat major, the third measure there, for me to write the F7 chord, I have to cancel the A flat in the key signature and put in A natural. The A natural made that chord chromatic. In the A flat major example, it's the same thing. I had to cancel the A flat and bring in an A natural. Likewise, in D flat major, we have to write A natural. And if I was in G flat major, I'd actually have to mess with 2 notes from the scale. I'd have to raise the A flat to A natural, and I'd have to raise the C flat to C natural. So all those chords in the green boxes that are secondary dominants look like a secondary dominant looks. They have some note on them that's not part of the key signature, that's not part of the scale we're dealing. The other thing you need to notice is, for our chord symbols, since they're major minor seventh chords, the chord symbols always start out the same way. It always starts out 5-7. The only thing that gets different is what's on the right side of that slash we put after 5-7. In the key of F major, that FAC E flat chord sounds like B flat's dominant, so we write 5-7 because it sounds like a dominant 7th chord. And on the other side of the slash, we write down a number that tells us where you find B flat when you're in the key of F. Well, if F's the first note, B flat's the 4th note, so we're going to write 4. And why did we write the 4 uppercase? We wrote it uppercase because in a major key, the chord we build on the 4th note of the scale is a major chord. Likewise, if you look at the next example, in E flat major, we write 5-7 for the major minor 7th chord, and then we write where B flat is in the key of E flat major. B flat's the fifth note of the scale, so we write 5, 7 of 5. And the chord built on the fifth note in a major scale is major, so we write the 5 uppercase. Now look in the third measure there. In A flat major, that FAC E flat chord, it still sounds like B flat's 5, 7 chord, so we write 5, 7. And on the other side of the slash, we write where B flat is in the key of A flat major. And B flat's the second note, so we write 5, 7 of 2. And notice that now we write the 2 lowercase because the chord we build on the second note of the A flat major scale is a minor chord. Hopefully that makes sense. So the big new word about secondary dominance that I said we get back to is the T word, tonicize or tonicization. This is what secondary dominants do. When I say they tonicize a chord, what I mean is this. They make a chord that comes after them sound like a tonic. That's what a 5-7 chord does all the time, right? Because 5-7, we're used to it being on the fifth note of the scale. It has a leading tone in it that goes up. It has a seventh that goes down, and it makes that next chord sound like the tonic. Well, secondary dominants make the chord that they're the secondary dominant to sound like a little temporary tonic. And that's what tonicization means. So when I'm in the key of, say, C major, and I write the 5-7 of 2 chord, what that 5-7 of 2 chord does is it tonicizes the 2 chord, the D minor chord. It makes D minor sound a little bit more weighted and a little bit more like a tonic by creating a strong resolution to it. So let's talk about how we work with identifying secondary dominants and getting their Roman numerals. I mean, it's sort of easy to get the Roman numeral for a secondary dominant because we know that we're going to call it some sort of a 5 chord since it's a dominant. So, you know, the first thing we need to do is figure out whether the chord we're dealing with needs to be analyzed as a secondary dominant. And the way to figure that out is by looking at the notes that are in the chord. If there are notes in the chord that do not fit in the key, that are not part of the scale you're using, like if you're in the key of A major and you look at the chord and it's got like a C natural in it or a G natural in it, that's not part of the key of A major. You need to decide that you're going to use a secondary dominant to explain what that chord is. So what we're going to do is once we identify them as chromatic chords and figure out that they're major, minor, seventh chords, what you want to do is this. Figure out what the root of that major, minor, seventh chord is. And I do mean the root, not the bass note, because these things can happen in inversion. So figure out what the root of the chord is. Once you figure out what the root of the chord is, like if the root of the chord is D, if it's a D, F sharp, A, C chord, then remember that the root of a secondary dominant acts like the fifth, or the dominant, to a tonic. So how far is it from a dominant to a tonic? It's a perfect fifth down. So go down a perfect fifth from the root of your secondary dominant. So if your secondary dominant was D, F sharp, A, C, D's its root, go down a perfect fifth to figure out what it tonicizes. What's a perfect fifth below D? It's G. So now you know what's being tonicized. That's what I want to tell y'all. That's definitely useful, and that's an easy way to figure out what's being tonicized. Find the root, go down a perfect fifth. Or you can go up a perfect fourth if you want. But at any rate, that's useful. Don't forget that. This next piece of information I'm hoping is useful and it doesn't confuse you. If it confuses you, go get your memory erased and forget this part. The other way to think about it is this. In a secondary dominant, like in a 5-7 of whatever chord, the third of that chord acts like a leading tone to the note it's tonicizing. Like if we had a E, G sharp, B, D chord, in the key of C major, say, the third of that E, G sharp, B, D chord, the G sharp, acts like the leading tone to the note it tonicizes. So you can do what you do with a leading tone and think up a minor second, up a half step. So what's a half step above G sharp? It's A. And you can do it that way. Let's try a for instance. Let's try the for instance from your textbook. There's a C7 chord on that little staff fragment there. C, E, G, B flat. It's a major minor 7th chord, so let me sing the fight song for the day, which is major minor 7th chords are always 5/7 chords. So, we know that C is the root of that chord. So if you want to figure out whose dominant is that C7 chord, think about what's a perfect fifth below C. Well, the perfect fifth below C is F. So that's 5/7 of F. The other way to think about it is if you want, think about the third of that C, E, G, B flat chord, which is the E. That's like the leading tone in what we're tonicizing. So what's a half step, a minor second above F, above E? It's F. So either way, you'll get to the same answer, which is F. Okay, and we know that our Roman numeral is going to start out by saying 5/7, because that's what we call major minor 7th chords. Then we'll write a slash, and what we're going to put on the right side of that slash is the Roman numeral that tells us what's happening on F in that scale. Like if we were in the key of C major and we had that C, E, G, B flat chord, then we'd say it was 5/7 of F, and in the C major scale, F is the 4th note, so we'd say it's 5/7 of 4. If we were in the key of E flat major, then the C, E, G, B flat chord is still F's dominant. It's still 5/7 of F. But in an E flat major scale, F is on the 2nd note of the scale, so we'd call it 5/7 of 2. And the 2 chord in a major key is a minor chord, so we'd write 5/7 of, and then we'd write minor, lowercase 2. And just to go through the last thing on the slide, if we're in the key of A minor and we had that C, E, G, B flat chord, it's still 5/7 of F. So we're going to start our Roman numeral out saying 5/7, and we'll write the slash. And on the other side, we're going to say where F is in the A minor scale. F is the 6th note of the A minor scale, and the chord we build on it is major. So we're going to write 5/7 of 6, and we'll write the 6 uppercase. And that's all I want to try to teach you all about these things today. So what I want to do next is look at the homework and actually work through, as a group, some of the homework. So meet me on the next slide. Here's the first part of the homework assignment. What I do is I give you a bunch of chords without key signatures. They are all major minor 7th chords. So they're all somebody's 5/7 chord. The thing I want you to do is this. Write underneath each measure the letter that tells me whose 5/7 chord that is. And it's basically a two-step process for how you do this. The first thing you do is figure out what the root of the chord is, because the chords could be in inversion or they could be in root position. And the second step is, once you know what the chord's root is, since the root of a secondary dominant is a fifth above the note it tonicizes, once you know what the root is, ask yourself, if that note's 5, what note would be 1? Or ask yourself, once you know the root, what note is a perfect fifth below? That's the way that works. The other way that works, that I hope isn't too complicated, is this. Once you know the notes in the chord, and you know the third, then you can decide you're going to go to the third of the chord and go up a minor second, and that'll give you the name of the note that's being tonicized. Either one will get you the right answer. Let me show with the first one there, which is an example I've already done, but let me explain how that example works. So there in the red circle is the chord. From the bottom up, it's got C sharp and E and F sharp and A. So the first thing you'd want to do is figure out, how do I take those notes and stack them to where they go root, 3rd, 5th, 7th? And, you know, through a little mental trial and error, you'll realize, well, if I went F sharp, A sharp, C sharp, E, that would be root, 3rd, 5th, 7th. So the root of this chord is F sharp. That's the first thing you want to figure out. Then the second thing you want to know, once you know F sharp is the root, to figure out what gets tonicized, you know, what's 1 when F sharp is 5? That's what we're really asking here. Well, when F sharp is the dominant, the tonic, the note a fifth lower than F sharp, is B natural. So the answer is B natural. The other way you could do this, like I say, is this. You could look at the F sharp, A sharp, C sharp, E chord, and not only know that F sharp is the root, but know that A sharp is the third. And then if you go up a minor second, up a half step from that A sharp, you'll get to the note you're tonicizing. Either way, it's the same answer. It's B. So let's look at that second chord. Same process. So in the second chord, from the bottom to the top, I see an E flat and a B flat and a G and a D flat. And if I wanted to figure out what the root of that chord is, I realize, well, for that collection of notes, it goes from root, third, fifth, seventh. It goes E flat, G, B flat, D flat. So E flat's the root. And when E flat's the root of a dominant chord, what note is getting tonicized? What note is a perfect fifth below E flat? That would be A flat. And of course, if you're using the other process, then when you know the chord is E flat, G, B flat, D flat, and you know G is the root, then you can ask yourself, or you know G is the third, excuse me, you can ask yourself, so what's a half step above G? Same answer, A flat. Let's try the next. The third one, from the bottom up, goes A, C sharp, E, G. Figuring out what's the root, you realize, well, the root actually is the bottom note there. It's the A. So if A is the root or the dominant, if A is the root of a dominant seventh chord, if A is the dominant scale degree, if A is 5, who is 1? What's a perfect fifth below A? It's D. Or the chord is A, C sharp, E, G. The C sharp, which is the third, acts like a leading tone. Whose leading tone is C sharp? It's D's. See, is this getting a little bit easier? So look at this fourth one. From the bottom up, it's got a G sharp and a B and a D and an E. So massage those notes around to get it into a root position seventh chord formation, and you realize in root position it's going to go E, G sharp, B, D. The root is E. So if E is the root of a dominant seventh chord, if E is the dominant scale degree, what is the tonic when E is the dominant? What is a perfect fifth below E? It's A. Or if you want to go the leading tone approach, in the E, G sharp, B, D chord, the G sharp is the third, and it acts like a leading tone. And when G sharp is a leading tone, what's the tonic? Still A. And for the last one in that line, I see an F and an A and an E flat and a C. And when I put those chords in a stack of thirds, the F is the root, F, A, C, E flat. So if F is the root, what's a perfect fifth below F that gets tonicized? A perfect fifth below F is B flat, not B. Remember, fifths with F and B are the ones where the signs don't match when they're perfect. So F to B flat is a perfect fifth. And the other way to check this is in the F, A, C, E flat chord, A is the third and acts like a leading tone. So what's a half step or a minor second above A? It's B flat. Okay. Hope y'all feel good to go on this because there are plenty more for you to do on your own for the homework. But let's look at what the next aspect of the homework is like in Part B. Okay, so it's a slightly different proposition here. You get a bunch of chords still without key signatures. And in this case, not only are all the chords major, minor, seventh chords, but I will go ahead and tell you they're all in root position. And then what you have written underneath each measure is 3 different keys. Could be major, could be minor. You can tell by what size the letter is, whether it's lowercase or uppercase. What I want you to do is tell me this. Write the Roman numeral for what each chord is in that key. It's always going to be a secondary dominant. So we're going to do the same stuff that we did in the last assignment. We're going to figure out what the root of the chord is. It's in the bass in all of these. And then we're going to go down a perfect fifth from the root to figure out what note's getting tonicized. And I did the example And let me tell you all exactly what the example is telling us. The example is a C sharp 7 chord. C sharp, E sharp, G sharp, B. So, C sharp's the root of that chord. And if C sharp acts like the dominant scale degree, then, you know, what's C sharp? A perfect fifth above. C sharp is a perfect fifth above F sharp. So that chord is the dominant 7th chord of F sharp. Since it's a major minor 7th chord, all of our Roman numerals are going to start out the same way. They're all going to start out 5/7 of. The only thing that's going to be different is what you write on the right side of that slash. So for A major, since it's a major minor 7th chord, we write 5/7 of, and it's 5/7 of F sharp. So in the key of A major, where do I find the F sharp? It's in the 6th note in the scale, right? A, B, C, D, E, F. And the F is sharp. And the chord built on the 6th note of a major scale is minor. So I write 5/7 of minor 6. Now in B minor, I'm still going to call the chord 5/7 because it hasn't quit sounding like a major minor 7th chord. But now I'm going to ask, where would I find F sharp in the key of B minor? F sharp is the 5th note of the scale. So I'm going to write 5/7 of 5. And with the 5 chord here, you can go 2 different ways, right? Because in minor keys, the 5 chord can be minor or major. It's almost always major, especially when like classical and romantic composers are writing it. But if you wrote 5/7 in minor 5, I would have to give you credit for it, or 5/7 in major 5. They both work because the major and the minor chord can both be built on the 5th note of a minor scale. And the 5th note in B minor is F sharp. And finally, that C sharp 7 chord, which is F sharp's dominant, if I was in the key of E major, the F sharp is the 2nd note, and the chord we build on the 2nd note of a major scale is a minor chord. So I'm writing 5/7 of minor 2. Does that make sense? Don't feel bad if it doesn't. We're going to do 4 more of these, lickety-split. So our chord in question number 2 is A flat, C, E flat, G flat. It's an A flat 7 chord. It's a 5/7 chord, so you can go ahead and write 5/7 of for all 3 of those blanks underneath there if you want. All we got to do is figure out when A flat is the root of a 5/7 chord, what note is it tonicizing? So if A flat's the root, what is a perfect fifth below A flat? A perfect fifth below A flat is D flat. So for all 3 of those keys, we're going to write 5/7 of whatever is happening on D flat in that scale. In the key of B flat minor, the thing that's happening to D flat in that scale is D flat is the 3rd note in the scale. And the chord we build on the 3rd note of a minor scale is major. So we're going to write 5/7 of major 3. Now in G flat major, D flat is the 5th note of the scale. So we're going to write 5/7 of 5. And in major keys, the chord we build on the 5th note of the scale is major. So again, uppercase 5. And in C flat major, D flat is the 2nd note of the scale. So we're going to write 5/7 of 2. And the note we build on the 2nd note of a major scale is minor. The chord is minor. So we're going to write 5/7 of minor 2. Is it getting easier? Let's go to the 3rd one. The 3rd chord is B flat 7, which is B flat, D, F, A flat. So the root of the chord's B flat. If B flat's the root of the chord, go down a perfect fifth to figure out what it tonicizes. And what it tonicizes, a perfect fifth below B flat, is E flat. Of course, the other way you could do this is you could go to the B flat, D, F, A flat chord, go to the 3rd, which is D, and say that acts like a leading tone, so I'm going to go up a half step. Guess what? You're going to be on E flat anyway. So the chord that is in number 3 is 5/7 of E flat. But we don't do that with the Roman numeral. We don't write 5/7 of E flat. We write 5/7 of and then a number for whatever's happening on E flat. So in the key of C minor, E flat's the third note of the scale, and it's major. So we're going to write 5/7 of major 3. Now in the key of B flat major, the E flat's the fourth note of the scale, so we're going to write 5/7 of 4. And the fourth chord in a major scale is major. And in the key of A flat major, the E flat happens on the fifth note of the scale, so we're going to call it 5/7 of 5, still major. And let's see what number 4 has to say. This fourth chord is a C, E, G, B flat chord, good old C7. So C is the root, and whatever gets tonicized is what's a perfect fifth below C. The perfect fifth below C is F. So, in the key of A minor, where is the F? A, B, C, D, E, F. It's the sixth note of the scale. So we're going to call this chord 5/7 of 6. And in minor keys, the sixth chord is major. But in D flat major, where do we find F? Well, the scale starts out D flat, E flat, F. So F is the third note of the scale. So we're going to call this chord 5/7 of 3 in D flat major. And the third chord in a major key is minor, so it's 5/7 of minor 3. And then think about the key of D minor. In the key of D minor, you're going to find F as well, and it's the third note of the scale. So we're going to call it 5/7 of 3 again, but in D minor, in a minor key, the chord on the third note of the scale is major. We'd probably go to an F major chord. So that's how we do this. And there's just one more. The last chord in the line is a B7 chord. B, D sharp, F sharp, A. B is the root. And a perfect fifth below B is our buddy E. So this is 5/7 of E we're looking at. And in the key of C sharp minor, E is the third note. And the chord we build on the third note of a minor scale is major, so this is 5/7 of major 3. Now in the key of C major, E is the third note as well, but the chord we build on the third note of a major scale is minor, so we're going to call it 5/7 of minor 3. And in the key of G major, the E happens as the sixth note of the scale. And 6 in a major key is minor, so we're going to call this 5/7 of minor 6. All right. Hopefully that is sinking in. You know, you can always listen to these things multiple times. So do what you need to do, read the chapter, but hopefully these things will help, and hopefully doing some homework will reinforce this. And here's that homework that I want to reinforce these skills. Basically finish what we've started. In Unit 13, go to Assignment 1, Parts A and B. And I've done the top line of both of them, so do the rest of it. Do the remaining portions of it that we didn't do in the video. And email me if you have questions. Please know that I am busily grading your tests, and I will get them to you as soon as I can. And I will see you Monday. Enjoy yourselves.